Okay, good afternoon. Today, my guest is Chris Puzzo. He's the enterprise architect at ezCater, which is an online marketplace that connects restaurants and caterers to different businesses. Now, Chris and I have known each other for a little while. I think he is an amazing engineering leader, has a unique perspective on both innovation as well as tangible business outcomes. He's hands-on. You'll find him very high energy, just even listening to him, and just fun to brainstorm with. So that's what we're going to be doing on this episode of A Tale of Two AIs podcast. We'll explore a range of different topics at the intersection of software engineering, AI, and the future of enterprise applications. So with that, let's get started. Chris, great to see you.
Yeah,
Thanks so much
awesome.
for hopping on.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Razi. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about ezCater and your role at the company, and then we'll just rewind back to your background, career progression, etc. But let's start with where you are and a little bit about ezCater.
ezCater is that we're the number one food technology platform in the US for workplaces. So really our bread and butter is around making it easy for companies of any side really to feed their workforce. And that can mean any different thing, right? From frontline factory workers to traveling sales reps to folks that are meeting quarterly for some team on-site, or they're in the office every day with recurring lunches and food needs. Nobody loves having to foot the bill and then deal with the expense management, or to get the right code from the procurement system to make sure you can have that activity. All of that we're seeking to simplify and manage and consolidate into a central technology platform. And that's backed by our core marketplace with over 100,000 caterers nationwide. And really, the thing that makes this whole thing work is our 24/7 customer service. We call our Beyond Helpful customer service, focus on business grade reliability. Because in the business setting, if I'm ordering pizza from one of the consumer marketplaces and it shows up late, I got a hungry kid, he's a little cranky or whatever. But if you do that when you've got 500 people that are waiting for their lunch, right? Or like that sales meeting that you got to hit to close the quarter, and somebody screws up on the food preference and there's shrimp in there and you accidentally poison the CEO, you might probably not going to get that deal, right? So food
Yeah,
complexity goes way up in a business setting. The stakes are much higher. And yeah, so ezCater is built from the ground up to really service that specific class of need.
makes sense. Yeah, so in my previous company, we used to order lunches regularly from ezCater. And the cool thing is, given all of the different partners you had, we had, just different types of meals every single time. It wasn't just like, okay, these are the only three caterers or restaurants that you can order from because they're the most reliable and convenient.
Yeah.
Which is definitely, yeah. I'm I very well know the value that ezCater offers quite personally. So tell us a little bit about your role, and then we'll talk about your career.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the enterprise architect here, which can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But what my role right now is, I direct report to the CTO, and I basically own our high level technical strategy as well as our overall kind of technical health and tech deck management and those types of things. So I partner directly with the management team and our overall product leadership team to understand, like, where are we going? What are some of the next big things? How do we solve the big problems, and then partner directly with our principal and staff engineering cohorts to say, what do we need to get ready to do for the next layer of scale, or how are we the stuff that we're talking about with AI and data science and machine learning. This is all new. What are we doing with it? What are the applications for it? How are we stepping into it? How are we learning and scaling, and really owning that technical strategy as an independent but extremely like complementary
Connected to the
strategy.
business. Yeah,
Yeah, to
yeah,
to both the product and business strategy.
yeah.
Make sure we're making time for both, because it's easy to get stuck in the product, to go deep in the product space, and then like actually pick your head up and, oh, whoops, the organization, our auth stack isn't where it needs to be anymore because auth 0 is out. And hey, maybe we should talk to them about stuff. So
Right, right. And the cool thing is you get to see pretty much have a view of the entire technology landscape, right? And you see a
Yeah.
bunch of innovation happening in every corner of the landscape.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And what I love about this business is we are a two-sided marketplace. So we talk mostly about the kind of what we call the demand side, or people that are buying, but we have 100,000 suppliers on our network too, and we need to partner with some really big national chains. And especially food technology has really evolved in the last 5, 10 years. You've got your toasts out there, and everybody's got some sort of a digital restaurant platform. And so we need to stay abreast of what's happening in those markets and changing too. We deal with external dispatching and drivers, and it's a very complicated like business and space, and it makes it really fascinating that every time I've been here 5 plus years, I'm still turning over rocks and finding business problems that I never would have considered. So trying to stitch it all together is the fun kind of chaos that I really like working in and try to make sense of it all. So it's a blast. It's a really complicated space, but really fun.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Before we met, started chatting about the business, I didn't quite appreciate the complexity associated with making sure that the right food gets delivered to the right people at the right time. You were talking about delivering to a business where you just don't know. There may be like 20 different groups sitting in a building.
Yep.
And how do you ensure that the caterer actually delivers to the right spot within the building at the right time? And yeah,
Yeah.
those are things that people usually don't think about.
Exactly. Yeah. Like delivery instructions of drop it off out front at a hospital is not helpful to anybody, right? There's no front of a hospital, right? So actually some little small things like that can like that alone can fundamentally change. Like doctors needed to eat and now they're not because the person couldn't find the way in and they missed the small window they had between surgeries to actually feed themselves. And so it snowballs in a very real way. We talk it's a real world problem that you can't solve it all with technology, which makes it also really interesting and unique in today's
Yeah,
contemporary landscape too. So,
indeed. So, Chris, thanks for that intro and sort of
mhm.
background on ezCater and your role. So let's rewind the clock back and tell us a little bit about sort of your career progression, how you arrived at your current role, because you've done a lot of different things. You've been at
Yeah,
startups, you've been at bigger companies, you've led engineering teams. So it's and with AI, sort of everything is kind of again being reinvented in many
yeah.
ways. So let's talk about how you got here, and then we'll talk about where things are going and how you think about the world and your perspective on it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I've been in tech for over 20 years at this point. I've worked everything from employee number 7 or 2 at like small, very early stage startup of we're a consultancy, but we're actually building a product. But no, we're a consultancy, but now we're building a product again. Also all sorts of stuff on that side. I've been in the Boston area for I think 17, 18 years now. I think I've been here longer than I've been anywhere else, so I officially qualify as a
Me too.
Bostonian. Yeah, and yeah, I've worked in my background really has been for the majority of my early career was just like kind of chasing what was interesting. Like I'm a forever learner, and so it was like, oh, there's something new over here. Let me go learn that. So I've worked in medical software, doing telehealth stuff like pre iPhone. So it was very early doing over Skype. And then I moved to a company that was doing voice recognition on BlackBerry Pearls. I did some Java server middleware there, but learned a lot about the voice space. Like I had no background in it, but got to work alongside PhDs from MIT on all sorts of crazy stuff. Went into a company that was doing consumer fashion technology because I wanted to learn consumer. I think somebody said Boston doesn't do consumer, and I said, okay, I'm going to go figure out how to do consumer. And then I fell in love with front end development there, got much closer to the product side of the house, and like, oh wait, this is something people can touch, and wait, there's customer problems here to solve, not just technical
Right.
problems. And then I decided I wanted to find the hardest front end problem I could find. So I found a robotics company that was building a visual programming IDE for their robotic platform. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty hard. And so spent a lot of time, grew up around when React was really coming into the forefront and mobile was really hitting it. And so like customer usability became like key for the first time in a way it hadn't been before. And from there, moved into did some e-com stuff, and then now here I'm in the catering space. And so along that track, I've gone through from like fairly high level IC to being a manager of small squads to when I came to ezCater, I was originally director of engineering for our marketing and growth technology. I kind of fell in love with the growth space at one point. Like experimentation and MarTech was really interesting to me, and took over a data technology group for a while. And then I was here, I've been the VP of engineering for probably about 2 years. And then last year, we decided to make this more formal investment in splitting our technical strategy out from our operational strategy. And so it says we created this architecture group, which it's been great. It's been easy, great to focus on the problems and work with a different group that can actually make sure they happen. But I can stay in the solve and creative space, and really help stay out of front in front of the company in a way that I've learned the value of all those other disciplines and how to kind of cobble them together in like an applied technology way. What do we need to do for the business? Great. I think a little bit of this, a little bit of that. If we put those together, then we can try that
Right.
problem. Then we can iterate from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this sort of cross collaboration between different teams becomes even more apparent
Yeah.
now with technology changing much faster. This the whole advent of AI in some ways. It just without the right set of collaboration, you're bound to miss out on all kinds of innovation that's happening in different parts of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just knowing the language of the other parts of the company. So, I know how to take what's being said out in the world and like, translate it to marketing speak to go have a conversation with my CMO, or to sales speak to go have a conversation with the sales team. Like being able to translate the technical to the practical across a variety of domains is the most important part of the job right now for a lot of leaders in this space because everything is changing so rapidly.
Right,
The ability to
right.
explain the change and the impact of that change is hard, and it takes a lot of time to wrap our
Yeah.
heads around. So
And I bet every business leader is also trying to figure out what the impact of Gen AI, predictive AI, different types of AI, and code generation through AI, how all of that is just going to change the underlying platform and the application you guys are putting out in the world. Right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
right. So great place to be, but definitely lots and lots of visibility and being in the limelight. So congrats. So Chris, just switching gears a little bit and on the same vein, I think it would be really interesting to hear some of the interesting problems and use cases that you and your team are focused on. Anything that you can talk about, or anything that's you're working on that's been delivered in the very recent past. I think it would be again great to hear some of the innovation you're bringing to the market.
Yeah, I think that probably the most exciting thing that's like appropriate for this space really is something that we're calling our smart ordering product. So, catering can be a complex, like you're ordering food for 60, 100 people, and it's different than you're ordering for 4 or 5 people in your home space, right? The needs for dietary needs are very different at that scale, right? And getting it right. And how do you source that? Do you source it every single time you need to feed the same group of people? You've got admins that are managing spreadsheets of like, who's okay. This person doesn't like this kind of food, and we ordered pizza last week. The goal of this is like that is there's too much work on the other side of the browser on for us. So like we're focused on consolidating the effort there. So our smart ordering product is really the big innovation we've been working on for the last year. Is how do we really recommend based on sets of constraints? What's your head count? What's your budget? What's your overall dietary restrictions? Where's it going? Okay, great. Here's 3 or 4 really good orders that either based on your history, based on other people's history around it, that can really accelerate. You just take something that could take you 45 minutes to an hour. Maybe you got to get your boss to sign off on it. So they want to see 3 different options. So you have to build the order 3 times. Like we've got 15, 17 years worth of catering data behind us. We know what makes a good catering order. We know, hey, don't order rice as a side for pizza. That doesn't, most people don't want that. Some probably do, but maybe not in your company. And we can really recommend great orders for folks. So yeah, that is probably our biggest area right now of really the applied data innovation. And that's a really interesting space too, because it's got a lot of layers, and I think it's a good topic for this discussion. We're actually applying a variety of traditional solver based solutions to this with Gen AI assisted natural language in our labeling stack. There's some predictive data science models in some of the what goes well with what type things, and so it's a whole package data product that needs a
Right.
little bit of everything to work well, and it's been really fun to work on.
Yeah, that is really cool. And I mean, at the end of the day, you're basically using, at least for me, the three key pillars of pretty much any enterprise application, which is this code for business logic, Gen AI for interactivity and unstructured data processing or generation, as well as predictive AI to really leverage all of the crown jewels, historical data that you have to just make an interesting application. In this case, you're making the life of your users a whole lot simple compared to what they would have to do in a sort of very repetitive manner every single time. And
Exactly.
as you mentioned, the stakes are really high, so it's a lot of pressure on the end user as well. And so here it's basically an AI assisted function for them to order and make sure that the right order goes through to the right caterer, right? And the recommendations are being made by this agent, if you will, from ezCater's. That's a really cool use case. So, as you were mentioning, it's got the application, and I'm pretty sure other applications as well that you're looking at and building out. They have multiple different layers, and we're just gonna peel through those as we progress in our conversation. But I'm just keen to hear with Gen AI. Obviously, the whole world changed,
Yep.
right? And your world changed in some interesting ways. Just curious to hear how engineering and sort of product development and the software development has changed in your world, and what are some of the interesting takeaways for other engineering leaders who are who've either gone through it or going through it right now as we speak.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for us, the journey with Gen AI started last year with some of the first, I think it was probably when like GPT 3.5 hit. That was the first like, oh shit, this is real. We actually do need to pay attention to it. It's not just like another hype cycle. And so what we started was we did it was like a 4 week kind of hackathon project. We ended up calling the project Generative Eats, because which is I use ChatGPT as name my project. uh, and the point on it really was to do kind of these, we wanted to just rip through as many different use cases as we could to do a very lightweight feasibility study. So we just took, I had 3 or 4 engineers that we were working with, and we did these we basically did like 1 week sprints, and we were like, we're going to run this until we're out of stuff to try it
Yeah,
through. And we were just like, okay, who's got a couple of use cases? And then we would do these, develop like a very tight learning agenda, get 2 days into it, like, okay, what did you learn so far, refine, and then have a demo on Friday with myself. The CTO was there, and we would kind of talk through realistically distance to done. If we want to turn this into product, is it like, no, the tech's not there yet for it? Or even at that time, we were like, we could build it, like we could build a chat infrastructure to do this ourselves, but that's going to become commoditized within 6 months. So let's wait on that, and let's start building over here, and then we'll buy that when it comes off the shelf. I think that was a really big unlock for us, was like actually putting some concrete wood behind the application of it. So then we could kind of
mm,
shop that around within the org of like, hey, product, we could do this. Hey, operations, we could do that. Here's rough feasibility. Maybe this one's 6 months away, but that one's 6 weeks away. Do you want it? How do we start exploring it? So that
right.
was really how we got started. And then lately, it's really been, there's the whole, there's the organizational shift of like, how do we get people to start using the Gen AI stuff in their day to day, which has really been a big question, which has really been a big area that we're investing, because it's a change, it's a culture change. We got people that I only use Vim, like, okay, but now use Coda instead, or I use Cursor instead. It's a huge change for them, and so there's that like hearts and minds piece, which we're really just starting on that journey.
Right.
But yeah, they'll explain regularly, continuous R&D on,
Yeah,
okay, here's a new use case, show it to the business. If we went deeper in the space, what would we get out of it? And really proving to ourselves that we could do
yeah,
this. If we invested another 6 months in this thing or 6 weeks in this thing, that we'd get something out the other side of it.
right. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting approach, and I feel like it's almost imperative for every tech team to go off and do it in a constrained manner so that it just doesn't become a sort of monster takes off a life of its own. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important to just run a bunch of different experiments and be
Mhm.
able to show the art of the possible to the business, right?
That,
I was talking to someone the other day, and the guy was saying, "Oh, we're investing so much in Gen AI. There are just so many projects going on. Many of these are going to fail. Oh my God!" And I'm like, "No, actually, that's a good thing as long as you manage the process really well, because unless you experiment, you're not going to learn. And of course, you can wait for 2 years for things to kind of settle down a little bit and then get in. But then it's 2 years of learning that you're not capturing within your organization. And you have to make a determination on whether that's okay. For a tech engineering based organization, I think it's not an option to wait. You just have to dive in.
yeah, and even this week there was a podcast that I was watching from the group at Reforge, which I love, like some of the best product leaders in the space, and they were talking about how like the adoption cycle of AI of Gen AI from a consumer perspective, like mobile was the fastest adopted like new product in history from a
Right.
disruption perspective, and even that took years because like when it first came out 2G wasn't fast enough to stream Netflix on it. And you had to go buy an iPhone. Whereas now ChatGPT is out and it's, oh, wait, a student can use this for free to do their homework. Yeah, of course, I'm going to start using it tomorrow. So the pace of adoption of the tech is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And so, like, where they were basically what they were saying was like the for folks that are waiting on this stuff, like your ability to somebody else's ability to leapfrog you if they're starting from scratch today is much tighter than it has ever
Yeah.
been in that space. So it is very dangerous to ignore this stuff right now. You got to figure out how would somebody else disrupt me with this technology. So let me do it first, right?
Right.
Is kind of
Right.
the mindset that they're preaching.
Yeah. And some of this was true even when we were just talking about data science, probably now 5 to 7 years ago.
Mhm.
Everyone sort of jumped on the data science and machine learning bandwagon and then realized that, oh, there are certain elements that are missing. For example, data is just not in the form that it can actually be used for ML, or the history is just not quite there, or the data warehouse is not set up the right way, etc. So there's just so many different things, and it's interesting to sort of hear your experiences between the early ML days versus the early Gen AI days.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's quite different, right? What's your experience been
Yeah.
across those two?
Yeah. I would say in the difference is like in when the early data science and ML stuff came out, everybody was like, oh, this is hard, and I need to find somebody that's smart that has studied it and draft off of them and learn what they're doing. So everybody's like, I gotta find a PhD, or I gotta hire somebody, or I gotta hire a consultant. The difference with this is like the barrier to entry is so low because it's and we're joking with my teams, this is going to make us better leaders because the way you need to speak to an AI to get it to do the thing is the same way you would need to speak to like an intern to get it to build your software for you. It's, oh, this is broken, do this instead. And but that's the barrier to entry now. You don't need a PhD and you don't need a background in linear algebra to be successful with the tech. And so that is what is causing there's a it's easy to be dangerous with it. But then I think that's the piece is you get into like the purist debate of yeah, but if the person asking the Gen AI to write their code for them doesn't know whether it's outputting is good or not, is that an effective use of the tech or not? And so I think that has been the big change is some people are excited to jump into it, but they're not fully sure if what they're getting back out of it is accurate, but they're going to push it anyway.
Right.
Other people are reluctant to like bring it in because we don't have the guardrails to know to validate against it. And even the concept of a prompt is, oh, I'm just typing into this thing. But one of the big things that my team is now, as we've been starting to play with this stuff more real, is like prompting is just code. It's a different software language. It's
Right.
the same way you learn. I learned JavaScript and my data team learned Python, but prompting is just it's just English language of a code. And so building that analogy of you still need a software development lifecycle for a prompt. You still need to version
Right.
your prompt, right? You still need to test your prompt, and that is a oh this is still the same thing, even though it feels very different. And that's been a bit of a mindset shift too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the more Gen AI starts to get incorporated into applications, I think the
Mm-hmm.
need to bring it into the SDLC it just becomes more and more apparent to different teams, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So something you touched upon is pretty much on a lot of people's minds, which is, okay, Gen AI is just so accessible. As you mentioned, you don't need a PhD in data science or CS to be able to use it, right? It's a matter of just prompting, which even a 10-year-old can do fairly effectively. So it brings up the question of, okay, so what's the role of data scientists going to be in this world?
Mm-hmm.
And is data science dead or has to be reinvented in some ways?
Yeah, so data science definitely isn't dead because like a prompt, there will be some amount of things that a prompt could grok from, by looking at data on aggregate. But I go back to the fact that as good as all O1 or DeepSeek or name your model of the day, I still can't get it to spell a word right in a picture, right? There are still edges of you ask it to do something. I'm working on an onsite for next week for my technical team, and I want to create a sticker out of it, and I couldn't get it to spell the word curiosity right in a picture. And no matter what I told it, right? And so there are still pieces where these things are struggling at precision. Like they will never get like current state of never. I'm not going to say never. Things are changing so fast. But current state is that
Right.
they're struggling with precision. So like we can see things like say, is this food healthy or not? Sure. Like it can tell you a brownie is not as healthy as a salad. That's fine. But that
Mm-hmm.
is very different than saying, give me a numerical value for whether or not this customer is going to churn. Sure, you could give you something, but I wouldn't put that into a financial forecast, right? I wouldn't, necessarily bake a marketing strategy based on a discounting
Or
program
workflow,
off
yes.
of something like
Mm-hmm.
that, right? They're totally untrackable, not governable. It's not possible to track the accuracy and the drift of that over time. It is, but it's
Yeah.
unfeasible, really. So yeah, data science is definitely not going away. I would say really it's interesting, like what is going to be happening is the intersection of BI and more conventional analytics with the data science space. Because with Gen AI, the access to data is likely going to change. And so people building towards using platforms like FeatureByte to do the more deeper data engineering work in automated ways to enable like the analysts to be more reading of the data, not building of the data. I can see those job families emerging to somebody that was a traditional analyst can shift more into like data science using more of that type of space if they want to be more hands-on versus somebody that didn't ever want to write SQL. They just wanted to read the charts can be more into
Right.
like business strategy. So it comes pushing folks into more bespoke disciplines. But yeah, data science is not going anywhere
Yeah.
anytime soon. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, I think no points for guessing that I 100% and wholeheartedly agree. That the LLMs were designed and Gen AI is designed to deal and it does an amazing job with unstructured data like text, images, etc. But when it comes to structured data, especially the kinds of tabular data that you have in your data warehouse or data lake, it's not only an overkill, but it's not the right tool for the job, right? And that is something that just gets lost in the noise in some ways, where everyone's talking about Gen AI just because it's so easy and their individuals are using it in their day to day. And they don't realize that, oh, there's another type of AI that actually has a lot of business value that I should be thinking about as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. there's a lot more education required in that area. So we talked about data science, but just on the other side of the spectrum, which is application development. Obviously, Gen AI is had and is going to have a huge impact on the way application development is done, the way these teams are organized. What do you see there? What kind of changes have you made at ezCater, and what do you see going forward?
Yeah, so I think one of the areas that we've been experimenting with is like do you have is it is, do you need like central we're thinking about these more as like data products really is like the type of thing. It's like there are, various there's data warehouse things and there's just these assets, but like a model, right, or something that's building a recommendation is itself a data product. It has a purpose in the overall landscape. And we've been back and forth on centralized versus decentralized models on these types of things, and we're finding much more success with the decentralized model of like community of practitioners, but that they are deeply embedded in the product domains, and that allows them to drive like local like customer problem expertise and then be able to kind of choose their own adventure, if you will. Where if you have someone with a strong data, it's called ML engineering, data science, AI, whatever you want to call it,
Mm,
near the team, then they can help steer on, no, this should be a hard data science problem, or like, no, this is one that you could solve with like a basic sentiment analysis to go pick a model off of Bedrock and run with it. Kind of that art of the possible needs to be
right,
locally in the team. And we're pushing more towards how are we educating both our product management group and our even our engineering managers too on how to detect the need for one of these to move into one of
right.
these spaces. Very similar in my mind to, we talked about mobile before, but like back when mobile came onto the scene, I remember the first time I had an exec that like cared about the button being above the fold, right? Like that was a thing that didn't exist right prior to mobile, but suddenly the
Yeah,
first time somebody's got an iPhone and the add to cart button's not there on the screen, we need to think differently, right? Our testing methodologies need to change. Did you break it on iOS? And but it works on iOS but doesn't work on the Android thing. Like we got to go back and fix it. So now how do we build our testing infrastructure to do that? Like it's the same class of problem that is now being applied. Where this is a new tool in our kit. It's a new user modality, and we need to choose properly when to do it. And I'm feeling like you have to have someone close to the problem, the business problem, to make that decision for you, or to make the decision with the team, with the pure context
right.
on it.
So I'm just curious. I think it totally makes sense that you have teams that are working closely with the business, and it's a decentralized org
Hmm.
where the let's say a dev team or a data engineering team or a data team can be much more closely embedded with the business. But what happens when you're trying to now operationalize and bring that into the product itself, and we have to engineer a solution? How does that process work? Because now you may have like teams distributed all over the place, and so coordination becomes a challenge, wouldn't it?
So we've ended up with a central ML data platform team effectively. So the infrastructure around it in the same, very analogous to a traditional called lowercase p platform team of that kind of the system relies site reliability, developer experience, uptime, like that type of stuff. And so we already had a data infrastructure team that was managing our ETL pipelines, and we were already going down the like how do we deploy models to SageMaker, and this was just a natural adjacency there. Okay, now prompts are just another class of data movement. It's all data movement underneath the hood, right? That's every problem comes down to it. So we've centralized those pieces, and we're really looking to invest in, okay, how can we build a library for LLMs? So if we're starting to build a foundation of LLM hosting on platform X, we don't want each team that's building access to those LLMs to do it themselves. No, one library that wraps it. And that way, if we need to swap that platform out over time, or say we're switching from OpenAI to these models on Hugging Face for cost reasons, every team doesn't have to make those decisions. We can have one team that's centralized on that, and those teams can just really focus on how to apply it. In the same way, we have like our tracking and experimentation library of, I want the product team to understand how to build an experiment. they don't need to know the intricacies of how session assignment is made and how like bucket A/B testing bucketing is done. Let that be a thing over here that somebody else focuses on. You just tell me, did you start the experiment when the person entered the flow, or did you start it before they did it? Right? Did you set the experiment up right? Did you read it?
Right.
And that type of analogy that we're looking for.
Makes sense. Yeah. So it's really important to have the right infrastructure in place so that you can have distributed teams that are loosely coupled, sort of working independently off of the same infrastructure and not reinventing the wheel where it's not necessary, right?
Yeah, and I think
Uh,
so. Yes, and the piece there that's interesting is like we call it kind of the platform paradox, the like classic chicken and the egg of if I had the platform, we could have lots more people doing this, but I don't have lots of people doing it, so they're not asking for stuff for the platform. And so that's been the pace is like how do we both grow the platform and the use cases kind of in lockstep. So we've been attaching the platform leaders to the actual like subject matter experts and like, what do you need the system to do? Okay, let's do it. What's the generic version of this? So we're incrementing into the features as the use cases explore. That way we're not over investing in a use case that's 2 years away or that tomorrow one of the big players launches it for free as a value add for their platform, building just enough platform for the use cases we have
yeah.
today while keeping line of sight on what might be next.
Yeah. And it's really important to be agile because things are
Yeah.
changing literally by the day, right? So you may end up changing parts of the platform that will have upstream and downstream effects on the rest of the stack,
Yeah.
for sure. So just moving on to one more topic that I do want to dig into, which is we talked about sort of applications being a combination of code, Gen AI, and Pred AI. And at the end of the day, one of the big challenges with predictive AI in particular is that the timelines and sort of the processes are generally very different from how you would otherwise use code in Gen AI, right?
Mhm.
So how do you think about bringing these together? Because ultimately, when you build an application, you have to bring all these three capabilities together and have all of the SDLC and processes and I don't know, auditing and whatever else support, the whole shebang that you
Yep.
need to think about. So how do you organize the teams and how do you think about closing down the discrepancy across these domains?
Yeah. So let's see what's the right way to frame this. One of the ways that we're approaching this is it comes back to the application of the tech, right? So there are some things where we're like, okay, could you try use the Gen AI to prove that there's a there, right? And then we can look at the accuracy of that, and then okay, this is cool, and this proves to us that if we invested in the more sophisticated data science ML backed approach to it, that there's something there. But we can use Gen AI to get rapid customer input, do our own kind of sniff testing on whether or not it could be something there, rapid prototyping. So there's that class of it, and then really it's baking it into we're looking at places where we can apply Gen AI to existing data centric applications and for an acceleration. So for example, as we're thinking about our labeling, food labeling, right, of how do I know this hamburger, or we get to actually play the game of is a taco a hot dog or a sandwich, or sorry, is a hot dog a sandwich? Like, that's actually something that matters to us, not just like
Yeah.
a fun debate. Or is soup a side or an entree? And some of that can be done through classical NLP based models, but we then that took a lot of hand labeling to get through it. So then we try, okay, what if we seeded those models with some Gen AI stuff, then had humans review the stuff out of Gen AI, and then use that as a seed into the model development? That has been really valuable for us to approach. So it's about, again, it's a tool and a kit, and it's easy for it to be a shiny object to solve everything that way, but it has edge cases. It's only as good as the current state of tech is around it. And really it's about just being diligent about how do we apply it. And we can apply it to accelerate existing projects, or we can apply it to replace existing projects. But again, like it's still so new, we don't know if we're replacing those existing projects for the long haul or just for a point in time to prove out to ourselves.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it's super important to understand both the capabilities as well as the limitations, because
Yeah.
otherwise you can get into a lot of trouble very easily. It's just like
Yes.
with any really powerful tool, you can cause a lot of harm without realizing what you're doing.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that's one of the things with this. Like it looks great in develop. Like everything always looks great in test, right? But when you put it out in production, does it work the same way? This is one that like Gen AI looks different when you put 100 responses through it versus a million responses through that same prompt. Like being able to actually know and have confidence, especially if you're putting it directly in front of your customers. Is it ready to be put in front of the customers? Is it going to speak to your customers with the same brand voice you would put in there? Is it going to do that consistently no matter what they say? Doing that at scale, and that's scary for a company that's got a high customer focus on it. So really, for us, the focus is prove it in the areas that we have confidence it's got an application for it, but don't force a customer to interact with it if it's not appropriate for that, or we haven't
right.
proven that it's actually going to solve the job for them in the way it needs to.
Yeah, and what we find is having the right sort of guardrails as well as
Mhm.
being able to constrain the problem so that making sure you don't have open-ended prompts asking for the Gen AI's opinion, because then you really don't know what exactly you're going to get as a as an answer, and
Yep.
how inaccurate it's going to be, because usually the accuracy is going to be very suspect.
Right.
So let me jump over to some advice for other AI leaders and technology leaders who are, again, wrestling with the same set of issues that we've been discussing for some time here. What advice would you give to tech leaders to sort of stay ahead of the game? Because this space is evolving just so fast.
Yeah.
It's a real struggle.
Yeah. So number one is, if you're not started, start. Right. So that's it, now is the time to do the discovery around it. The stuff is changing so fast that there's not time to wait for it to settle down. We need to figure out how to iterate along with it. Number two is, we've been using the term internally, like we are dating as for around like AI platform vendors, like LLMs, models. Like the market is not there to commit to anything, right? DeepSeek came out, whether you believe what they put out or not, like a 30x cost reduction in one of the best performing models out there. If it proves it out, like whatever, but like, just like how different that is. Like a week ago, that was not the case. A week ago, $200 a month seemed like a great price for this stuff. Right now, I don't know, right? And so that's we've been that's our one of the experiences we've seen is working with the platform vendors directly, doing POCs. There's a lot of folks that are out there that wants to help you understand how to use the tech. And I think leaning in that way of, if you have a vendor of choice, a platform that you're interested in, reach out, ask for their account managers, reach for leaders, reach up through your VCs. Somebody's got a connection around you to get you a connection to talk to one of the vendors, to find you an account manager if you don't already have it, and they will be more than happy to teach your team how to use their stuff, because that's going to obviously get them money out the other side. But from that comes learning on what to do, what not to do, what this platform is good at, what that platform is good at, what this model is good at, what that model is good at. And really, for us, that's been the piece. Like we dug in, we've been evaluating vendors, but we decided we wanted to try to build a piece of it ourselves. So that way we knew what we were buying. And that's really the big piece of this, is like working. Eventually you're going to have to buy some of this stuff. You can't build it all for yourself, like unless you are a platform vendor on it. And so being judicious about how to make that build buy decision for yourself based on experimentation and a real data set. And you got to find a way, if you don't have that experimentation and discovery lane somewhere in your stack around this, you got to carve out time for it. And then my last piece of advice on it would be like, find a champion in your org that can do this for you, right? You don't have to lead the innovation, but there are lots of people in your org that would love the opportunity to step up and chase this. Let them go to reInvent or Dreamforce or whatever event that's out there that where there's education around it. Make it a thing, get them inspired to drive it, and then have them teach the rest of the organization. Because to stuff that needs both top-down strategic mandate and bottoms-up groundswell and excitement to get folks to really try it and test it, but also needs the leadership guardrails that we don't know the answer yet. So don't ask a team to put a financial commit around an LLM based approach for something you've never tried before, because we have
Right.
no idea whether that's going to be successful or not. So it would be imprudent to commit to your board that you're going to get value out of it until you validated whether or not you can get value out of it.
Yeah, the key is rapid and running numerous experiments
Yeah.
and running them as rapidly as possible. I think that's what I'm taking away from what you just described. So what's exciting for you in 2025? It's I'm sure we're going to see just crazy amounts of innovation happening for the foreseeable future, at least, if not just in 2025 or in the next couple of years. What gets you really excited?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is on the around the stuff. So I'm really excited about agents just as a concept. They're new, they're really interesting. There's a lot of really cool stuff that is coming out around it. It's a wrapper for a lot of automation stuff that we could think we could do anyway. But it's nice that it's got a name in a way that we can talk about them. And then now the proliferation of agents and like agent platforms and with OpenAI's Operate that just came out, right? Like that is a really interesting novel take on it's like kind of chat GPT combined with Selenium. And yeah, that makes sense. That's going to exist. And so I think seeing how the customer ecosystem changes, like having lived through the mobile switch, like when I was working on voice recognition on mobile and we're doing testing on a BlackBerry Pearl and an iPhone 3 and a Nokia N90 and a Symbian, like the amount of stuff that to experiment on, the surface area is just massive. And really seeing how it changes customer expectation, like the consumer adoption rate of this is going to be really interesting. The other thing exciting and scary is what does this do to disrupt how much of the Google search and like SEO has been the growth lever for a lot of companies for many years. Like, what is the next version of SEO? What's Google going to do with it? As if AI can answer the question for you, but used to have a blog post that would answer that question, it's not going to rank anymore. What's that going to do to your business? And what's going to come next? The Google can't live without this forever. And obviously ChatGPT, as they go in, OpenAI goes into the space that they don't have a mechanism yet for monetizing it, but there likely will be. So yeah, it's basically a brand new world for a lot of things, which is scary, but it's also exciting to see.
Yeah.
We got iPhones out of the last generation of this stuff, and I know some of the best developers I've ever met are mobile developers, and it's a thing that would not exist. So I was really excited to see kind of where the
Indeed.
tech
Yeah.
goes now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just the agentic frameworks and the whole concept of AI agents is completely going to change the way software development gets done. There's no doubt about that. How things evolve and how long it takes for these agents to really sort of manifest themselves in different applications, that remains to be seen. But it's going to happen faster than we think, I think.
Yeah, and I think for me, the agents are kind of. I talked to my team. It's almost like a moonshot of. It's not about getting to the moon. It's like about productizing Velcro, right? It's that type of thing. It's like for agents to work really well. Like all agents are just like an LLM based interface to a bunch of stuff your system can already do anyway. And if your system can't do the thing, wrapping an agent on top of it to make it easier, it's not going to solve anything. So like giving agents the tools they need to be able to deliver on the things you want them to do actually is just like good software development practice anyway. It requires API design in a way that you probably should be doing. It requires like service encapsulation in a way that you should probably be doing. And really that's really all this is at the end of the day. It's like a nano service interface on top of the capabilities your system can already do. And that for me is, if there's a spot anyone can invest in right now, it's that. It's get your system ready to interact with the agents of the future. Even if you're not ready to build them yourself right now, the agents are going to want to take action in your system in a way that your system probably can't support today. And so thinking through it from that level will really has helped us anyway, think through our overall technical strategy and roadmap in a way that just like it's just good motherhood and apple pie type things anyway. but with this cool shiny object to point it to get
Yeah.
people excited about it in a different way than they have been.
Yeah, and I think that something you just mentioned, I think, is a great way to think about just software architecture and perhaps some design patterns. Is think of these agents as nano services, like you mentioned, where the interactions between the agents are going to be very different compared to traditional microservices.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're encapsulating some service, think about the most atomic piece of service you can encapsulate within the agent just to create the level of flexibility in your architecture, right?
Exactly, and because that gets us to the degrees of accuracy that you need. If you have a agent whose job is just to understand a particular business policy, don't confuse it with the ability to apply refunds, right? Let it just be the policy agent. Let it be really good about your policy stuff, right? And don't worry about it having some management infrastructure. Build a separate thing for that, because that allows us to independently tune and optimize and iterate on those things in the same way we would do service encapsulation and
Right.
yeah, exactly.
And so that'll require perhaps an even more and deeper understanding of the business
Right.
so that you're able to encapsulate whatever the part of the business that you're trying to create as an agent in a really meaningful manner, right? Yeah, so that'll be yet another shift in the way software developers have to think about their roles in different organizations, how they align with the business, and how much they have to invest in just sort of working with the business as opposed
Mhm.
to just writing code.
Exactly.
It's very interesting. One last question for you, Chris, and I know we're pretty much at the end of the time, but we can keep going, right? So I'm asking this for, for any of the guests that we have on the podcast is just give us three resources that you rely on to keep you updated with sort of the latest in AI, because that's going to be super helpful.
So one, Hacker News, right? Like stuff floats to the top of Hacker News all the time. It's changing so frequently. They're just regularly just looking at that, seeing what floats, reading it, checking it out. Number two is then my feed, my news feed, just like having read enough of those articles, like the good ones just pop up there naturally when I open my phone. And so it's really about, it's like when something pops up, I'm going to read the Medium article about it, right? If there's, I don't go deep on all the white papers, but like, hey, this one sounds interesting. Let me check out that just to keep a pulse on what's happening out there. And then three is my team. And it may sound a little squishy, but like the most of the information, like getting my team excited, and my team was some of the ones that got me excited. Like, hey, read this, check this out. And then now just like the article sharing, the book club, like we have emojis that are specifically for, I'm just posting this article because I found it cool. It's here if you want to read it. Like our a library type group. But just information sharing, that the information radiators within an organization around this topic are critical right now, to be able to understand what's changing so frequently, but also helping your team navigate. Read this. This is interesting for these reasons. This is a blog that talks about the application of it. Or Anthropic just put out at the end of December last year, like a really great article on just like not everything's an agent. Like there's like workflows, or actually people talk about agents, but they really mean workflows, and really talking through some of the patterns they've seen around it. Like reading these first party materials around the patterns people are seeing. Everybody is writing about this stuff right now, and just being able to get as much of it into your head, your team's head as you can, because no one person can answer this question. It's bigger than all of us, and getting it into just the zeitgeist of our organization has been critical to us being able to get the momentum behind deeper investments in it, both on the product side and at the day-to-day hands-on keyboard folks.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to be a learning animal and just be completely open to input from just all different parts of the organization as well as outside the org, right?
Yeah, and don't be afraid to radiate information up. I send my CTO, I send my CEO stuff all the time. Hey, read this article. You know, check it out. This is what I'm reading. I want you to have the same context here. I see it important for this reason. And I've also done some things. Hey, this plus this. When I see these three articles come together, hey, and last year in the same week, the DOJ came out with their antitrust push on Google, recommending Chrome to be sold off. The week before that, ChatGPT released their Search GPT thing. And then the following week, OpenAI, there was a rumor about them building a browser to compete with Chrome and say, hey, if you put these three things together, maybe we should be paying attention more into this space. And so being able to composite the story of all these different data points and hold that with both the executive team up and with our team down to share your mental
Right.
model of it is critical to help everybody like navigate the chaos here. Just there
Yeah.
is some anchor point. Somebody's got to synthesize perspective on this, so we can at least talk to that person about it.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's all about connecting the dots and
Yeah,
doing it on a continuous basis. So
absolutely.
awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much. I really appreciated the time, this fascinating conversation. I think we touched upon so many different topics. I think this is going to be super interesting material for a lot of folks who are, quite frankly, thinking about exactly the same set of things, same set of topics. They're wrestling with the same problems in many ways. And I think this will be hopefully the start of a conversation that we can strike with a bunch of other folks as well.
Yeah,
So thank you again and wish you all the best and congrats on what's coming down the pike in 2025.
yeah. Thank you, Razi. Yeah, this has been a blast being on. I love this conversation. So happy to be back whenever you want me. So
Awesome.